Hello everyone, I'm Joey. I work for Thor's Game Development Studios, and I've been in gaming since 2009. And I will give a presentation about our experiences with Blender using for game development, and a little bit about the Oculus Rift. So this is shortly what I'm going to talk about. Everything from getting into Blender, what are the experiences from people who we converted to Blender, and a little bit about game engine compatibility and those kind of things. So first, a little introduction. We at ThoughtWorks develop multi-platform games for Linux, Mac OS X, Windows, and we even created build for FreeBSD a couple of months ago. So all our games are going to BSD, because why not? We're focusing on creating games, but yeah, fate has brought us to game engine development because multi-platform gaming wasn't really a thing a couple of years ago. Until recently, Linux became a more active platform for games. So the first question, why use Blender for games? There are a lot of people who actually ask me this question because there are a lot of plugins for Max and Maya and those kind of things, importers to different kind of game engines, and a lot of game engines have their own tools. So why use Blender? It does almost everything. It's interesting to say that because there are also a couple of things lacking, but if you're just creating games, doing everything from A to Z, everything is in Blender. Especially for game development, you can create all kind of models with it, sculpting, normal, texturing, rigging, it's all in Blender. And most of the time it can be converted to every kind of format, but I'm getting into that a little bit later. One interesting showcase is that a couple of years ago, I talked to a friend of mine and he said, what about levels? Can you create levels with Blender? And the first thing I thought was, why not? If you're using a level editor, you're basically doing the same what you can do with Blender, but with Blender you have more control on what you're actually doing. So this question is kind of how it most of the time goes. And I'm going to show really short how you can create a level in Blender. Takes a little while because NVIDIA Optimus is a bitch. So it is getting interesting. What's going on? This is new. Ah, there we go. Let's see if I can get this working. We just take a box. Where's most of the time? We use face selection to take the top one. Extrude and scale a little. Take the sides. Move it upwards. Perspective is really interesting for me. Where I actually have no clue what's going on right now. Oh, it's kind of works. Yep. Take the middle plane, set it downwards. And the cool thing about it is that if you use I was going to demonstrate UV mapping, but this is not working at all. But anyway, it's quite easy to create simple levels and texture it and get it working in a game engine quite soon. That's the whole point I was going to make anyway. Sorry about that. Anyway, a lot of people who've been using with Blender ask me this question: is it difficult to switch from the regular application I use to Blender? Are there similarities? What are the differences? It is difficult. And the answer I give most of the time is not really. The interesting thing is that we had a lot of people coming, working for us, or doing internships, or just open source projects with us, and they normally come from Max and Maya and those kind of applications. And almost everyone has a little bit the same experiences. So there are like 4 weeks. That's the average that somebody learns the application when they go full-time into it. What happens the first week is, I love how all the buttons say what they are. That's the first thing that everybody says to us. Normally there are like thumbnails and applications with weird square thingies, and you have to hover over it to know what it is, and most say, hey, there's text and everything is what it is, and it's quite easy to get into it. But they also learn quite fast about the wiki, because a lot of information is not really clear where it is, so I point them to the wiki, and most of the time they can find it out. Some prefer IRC, which is also quite good, but it takes a while before you can get your answers if the IRC is idling or whatever. And space is something that a lot of people find quite useful. There isn't in every application something like a library for all the functionality you can find. So this is one of the key features that most of the people find really interesting. Second week, people start noticing that they can find what they're used to in other applications. Stuff are in different places. This is kind of basic UI design, so it should not be that much of a problem. But Blender hides some things in different places. There are, especially when integrated with our massive engine, we use things from the Blender internal panels, but we also use Blender values from the Blender game engine. So we make it a little bit more difficult even, but they discover hotkeys, and it's quite a big thing for people. People optimize their workflow using hotkeys, and a lot of mouse users who normally don't even have a keyboard in front of the workstation start to prefer using hotkeys to optimize their workflow. In week 3, they start experimenting. They find different kind of features they never knew was in the modeling applications, such as sculpting in a modeling application, or hey, there's a node tracking system. I don't know what I need to do with it in a 3D application for games, but it's awesome that it's there. So people get distracted a lot, which is quite unfortunate if they need to get work done. But it's awesome that they noticed all the cool functionality of Blender. And week 4 is most of the time that people say, I get it. I know how everything works, or I at least know how I can get something done. And this is quite cool. But we didn't have a really good use case of is this happening every time, or just in a specific mindset, or whatever. And then a couple of months ago, I guess it was about 2 months ago, we got two students from a school in Eindhoven, a 2D and a 3D artist, and we said, hey, let's test it out. So Project Ebola started. It's a 3-week game by 2 students. They only were allowed to use open source software. So everything was on Ubuntu GNOME Shell Remix. only were allowed to use Blender, QuickTime, MyPaint, GIMP, Firefox, whatever, the whole shebang. They learned Subversion, and there was about maybe 3 weeks preparation, and they started heading into the 3 weeks of game development. And I'm going to show it right now, if I can get it going. So this is our own game engine, the Massive Engine. It's based around complete Blender integration. I did a talk about it 2 years ago. Basically, it loads blend files directly, translates every feature from physics and materials to all kind of interesting, difficult stuff. And the entire project was created in Blender with the game engine in mind. Let's see if I can do it this way. Controllers are easy. So this is the game they created. It's a simple first-person adventure game. The idea is that you're trapped in some kind of Aztec kind of world, and you need to get to the top of that giant floating building. So you're faced with a couple of challenges, especially jumping puzzles, things like you can't really go over here. So you walk a little around, you find a thing, and you press a button. And what happens? Nothing. I think I fucked up my controller bindings. Let's press E. Oops. I think my controller doesn't like this. One moment. There we go. So objects start floating and the world's starting to create itself. Ooh, ah. Or you just could fall. Let's try it one more time. And this is why I need a clone screen for our presentation. Not again. I guess it's stuck. Anyway, the whole idea is about exploring the world and finding all kind of different puzzles. There's a big jumping puzzle inside of the building over there, and everything is created with Oculus Rift in mind. The idea is that as a first-person player, you can experience the whole world by yourself, walk in it, look at all the art, and look at all the things, and microphones falling. And this game is actually playable tomorrow with the Oculus Rift upstairs. We have a setup going on, and you can see if you can make the jumps that I can't, apparently. So that's that. So that game is created in 3 weeks, and I spoke with the guys and said, "What do you think about it yourself?" And the first thing I heard is, "This is really crazy. I'm never going to do a game in 3 weeks again. It's kind of short." But I also heard, I really know how everything is working right now, and that's something that is quite useful. And I don't know why LibreOffice doesn't allow for remembering slides. Anyway, let's talk a little bit more about game engines, because I'm good at that. There's game engine compatibility for Blender through exporters and importers. Some engines have their own formats, like Quake has their own format, the MD3, 4, 5 format and stuff like that. And the good and the bad thing about Blender is it supports a lot of them. But a lot of those importers and exporters are hidden in the preferences menu. So you have to go to the preferences menu yourself and look at exactly the importer or exporter you need, enable it, then save it as default, and the next time you start Blender, you can use it. But a lot of people don't know this and go whining on IRC or don't bother with documentation and just go on the forums and rage a bit. So I actually think this is a quite problem that we have, because if you want to use Blender for your game, you at least should be not be facing the whole, I need to set everything up before I can actually finally test my models. So that's a little bit of a problem. So we fixed it with a massive engine, which is which works, I guess. And we used the blend loader from Blender itself and converted everything to data streams and parsing the data streams back to Ogre, which we use to render everything, and everything works well. There are a couple of other projects who do this, but most of the time they convert to another format and import that into their own game. So you get a lot of bulky binary files, which isn't that fast for loading times and those kind of things. And the idea of what we're doing with our engine is expanding on that and can see what we can get out of Blender. We have faced some problems with integration. I'm going on about that in a little bit. And there are some general issues with Blender and games in general. And I hope I can address this and we can fix this as a community. So what we're doing with the Massive Engine is we're working on a new renderer called Ultima Lux. It's a deferred kind of renderer. We're working with some new techniques, and we hope to get something in a couple of months done. We will create an online video explaining what we did and a little bit about the protocol behind it. One of the things we would like to do is get the Massive Engine as viewport into Blender. I heard there are other people who are trying to get their own renderer into the 3D viewport, and that it's requested every year on the conference, and that this is something we need to fix, but I'm addressing that in a little bit. So, how to improve? There's a couple of fundamental issues with Blender and games, and that is probably because Blender is not created with games in mind in the first state. It's created for movies, big projects, and it's fine. But one of the problems that you can get is duplicate materials and textures. This is an absolute pain in the ass. The biggest problem is that if you're creating something and you need to convert it, you most of the time append and instead of linking. It's especially useful because you transfer files a lot from system to system. Normally, you sometimes use SVN or something like that to control everything. So you pack everything. If you get all the objects and a level editor is using it, a mapping guy, and he appends all the information, you get a lot of duplicate materials, while all the information and all the textures are exactly the same. This is kind of a problem because GPUs don't like that a lot, and you get really fast that you're out of memory. So applications, seg fault, Windows blue screens, whatever. So I think this is something that could be fixed. We tried it ourselves and it kind of works, but I think when more game engines are trying to incorporate Blender and blend while using, then we should address this problem from inside of Blender. One of the possible fixes that I'm proposing is introducing the option to compare material data when appending, so texture file size, dimensions, properties, things about the material that you could compare, and only load the material when the data is different. That allows for duplicate textures with the same information to be just loaded one time. It should be toggleable because I think there are some cases that your file size could be exactly the same and you just append another color on it or something like that. So there should be some control about it, but this reduces blend file sizes by 1/100 of megabytes. And we had this problem with Rob Tuitel when we first converted a movie scene to a game scene, which we're going to show a little bit later. And it's a big problem because the movie pipeline and the game pipeline are completely different, especially with resource management. So we should do something about that. Yes, we can support we support blend linking. So, but appending is easier most of the time, I guess. One of the other problems are inverted faces. It happened so many times that I loaded a blend file into the massive engine or other kind of through exporters to other kind of engines, and my faces were inverted. That's kind of a big deal. There isn't really a good way in Blender to toggle that. There are exporters which just make everything double-sided, which is not optimal for culling and performance increasement. So this is something that also should be addressed, because nobody likes double renders, nobody likes... Sorry? Yeah, that doesn't really work for all data types, but Sorry? Yeah, but what I find is that there are some cases which you created models, and it's not really clear what is and what isn't the backface face. So that is something that maybe having a little highlight option, like these faces are inverts and these faces are wrong, the good side, that would fix a lot, and it reduces a lot of frustration. And the thing that I talked about earlier, the possibility for pluggable real-time renderers. Every year I heard people about, it would be cool when I could get my own renderer into Blender, and it's possible with using the external renderer options that we already use for Lux renderer, those kind of things, Portrait. But it would be cool having your own renderer into the 3D viewport. And I tried it, and it's really hackish. There's not really a good, sensible way of doing this. So having something in the API to handle this, maybe some default formats, maybe some templating, would create a lot of attention for different kind of renderers for inside Blender. I know there are some things planned with the new OpenGL renderer going on, and maybe this is something that we could incorporate into the design. Finally, I want to talk about the Oculus Rift. This is something that we have been implemented last year into our massive engine. We were fortunate to work with some people who owned one, and this is really incredible. But one thing that's also the result of using the Oculus Rift is that creating content is really different. You see a lot of problems with your meshes and with your materials and with your UV mapping that you don't see when using regular content. So that's an interesting thing. And one of the things we did was we took a movie scene from Rob Tuitel and we ported it over to a game scene and see how that ended up. At first, it crashed a lot because of the whole memory and texture issue. But finally, when we cleaned it up, everything worked well. It's amazing to see how things can be ported from a really different kind of way of working into the game. So maybe in a couple of years we can get Sintel running in the game engine real time or something like that. That would be great. I'm going to show it for a short while and finish up. At least I don't have to jump over things. A lot of files. So this is a church. It's from the Golden Age, and it was directly ported over from a movie scene, cleaned up, and put into Blender. The cool thing is this works entirely perfectly with the Oculus Rift. Tomorrow we are also going to give we're sitting upstairs with laptop and Oculus Rift, and you can try it for yourself, because the Oculus Rift is not something that doesn't really work. It doesn't really work where you don't actually have the Oculus Rift on. So I would like everyone to drop by, try it for themselves, and see how it works. So. I really hate that I do this. So this was my presentation. I guess. We are starting with the first couple of adapters. Adopters of the engine in a couple of months. If people are interested in getting their hands on it, they can talk to me afterwards. We can see what we can get going. If people want to see more about the engine, just drop by, say hi, and we can get things arranged. Thank you.
So this was it for today. In a few minutes, we are going to start the open stage, open podium. So if somebody wants to have a break, there are 5 minutes, and then we're going to get started. And then at 7:30, the Susanne Awards winners will be announced, so definitely stick around for that. I will be here in 2 minutes to talk to everybody who wants to be part of the open stage. So just come close by, and then I will show up again, and we can talk.
The whole screen.